Okay, it is 2 o'clock, so we are going to begin. Welcome to the Northwest Regional Library System. We have our author talk with Michael Lister, who is a New York Times bestselling author. And I think the format, we're going to try to do some questions. And so if you have questions, put them in the chat box. I'll add them to my list. But I wanted to start the program with the question of please introduce our audience to your new series, starting with A Dark Radiant Rain.
So it's been a while since I have started a new series. My John Jordan series has been doing so well, and I've had so many ideas that I just couldn't get to them all. So it's been quite a few years since I've written outside of the John Jordan series, and I'm going right back to it now that this book is out. But with this new book, A Dark Radiant Rain, it is the first in a new series, and I have several books planned with these characters. It gave me an opportunity to create new characters and a new environment, new opportunities for world building and that kind of thing, and to explore a different facet of North Florida and of crime fiction. I feel like if readers like the John Jordan series, I think they'll like this series. If they like the John Jordan series, but it may be a little too intense or a little too gritty, I think they'll love this series. It's not a cozy, but it's definitely a more soft-boiled series as opposed to the hard-boiled crime fiction. There's definitely, I think it could fall under the category of romantic suspense. There is romance, but at its heart, it is a mystery. It's a whodunit. And unlike any other series I've done, this one has two co-equal protagonists. So both the male and the female lead are telling the stories. We're seeing from their perspective, their point of view. They're both point of view characters. And so you have a chapter with Sawyer, Payne's point of view and what he's going through and everything. And then you have a chapter from Kace Mason's point of view and what she's experiencing. And they're both amateur sleuths. Neither one of them really have a background in detecting, but they're both really drawn to true crime. And he's a counselor, psychologist. She's a former nurse. And so they bring those perspectives to investigating, and they find themselves in a very unique situation. They are both, for different reasons, in a retirement community. They're both well under the age of retirement. So they are in this environment where they are by far the youngest. And so they're navigating that, as well as, so they're trying to get adjusted to their new lives. And yet they're so drawn to this case that is just baffling, and about a man who walks into a bar and never walks out again and just vanishes off the face of the earth. So that's a little bit about the new book and the series.
So, what is it about the true crime that this one's based off of? It's a Brian Schaefer case, correct?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
what is it about that case that captivated you?
I'm a huge fan of true crime. I study true crime. I love true crime. I am often inspired by true crime for my fiction, and I incorporate it in a few different ways. Sometimes it's I take a case and the fiction I write is inspired by it, sort of based on it, and I take elements of it and create my own story. Other times I actually put the true crime in the novel, and my fictional case sort of parallel to it. In this instance, I took the case of Brian Schaefer and used that as an inspiration for my book. This case is one of those that is one of the greatest mysteries in human history of true crime fiction. It's similar to the Maura Murray case, where you have what seems like an impossible disappearance, and it's a disappearance that is not only so improbable, but it is, decades pass and they're still missing. And you have an army of online armchair detectives, citizen sleuths, trying to investigate these crimes, and yet still nothing has come of it yet.
Was it for this one where you had a group of readers kind of helping create possible solutions, or
In the last
please dive
two,
in?
yes, in the last two novels, I've done solve a crime with me, a true life crime case with me. So as I'm writing the book, we're having this ongoing online discussion about the case, and people, we investigate it together. We offer theories. We have back and forth conversation about, what is possible, and people can sort of test their theories and ideas with one another, and we can question, okay, you say that's what happened, but what are you basing that on? Trying to tie it to evidence, and trying to separate the start with what's most probable, then maybe getting into some of the more far-fetched but still possible theories. And the reason they're possible is we just don't know, because the person is still missing. And in the case of Brian Schaefer, he walked into this bar for the second time in the same night with a friend and his friend's girlfriend or female companion. And he's captured on video entering the bar. A little before closing time, he's captured again out in front of the bar talking to two young women. And then he walks back into the bar. And a few minutes later at closing time, 2 a.m, his friend and his female companion are shown leaving. They leave via the escalators just like they arrived. And every entrance and exit is covered by cameras. Obviously, there are, hundreds of people around watching. There's 2 security guards seen on the camera right in front of the bar, and yet he vanishes and he's never seen again. So he does truly walk into a bar and never walks out again. And of course, the bar itself and the building it was in was thoroughly searched. There was both search dogs and then later cadaver dogs brought in, and just no trace whatsoever. There was construction happening in part of the building. And so there's a lot of questioning of, is it possible that he got injured? It was just an accident. Did he fall into some sort of, hole or shaft, or and got buried somehow and the cement was covered him? But there's just, in a case like that, there's just so many different possibilities. It's fun to explore. And I use that word carefully. We are talking about a real life tragedy. And I always try to be so respectful, both of the person, the victim, and their families. But there is an element of entertainment to true crime podcasts, to investigating. It's fun to look at these things and just to discuss them. And my personal opinion is, it is okay for it to be entertaining and okay for it to be fun, as long as we're also simultaneously respectful, and that we are careful over the feelings, and never forget that this is a real person, a real tragedy, and that there are people whose world ended essentially because their son vanished, or their daughter vanished, or was murdered, or disappeared, whatever the case may be. But the theories of what could have happened, I mean, you do get into the realm of fiction. It's the realm of an imagination, and to me, that's why it lends itself so well to my crime fiction, because you have these cases that there's enough space in them because of the unknowns, that allows for creativity, that allows for fiction, that allows for the kind of stories I'm telling, and exploring different possibilities of what might have happened.
So for your new title, you have Sawyer, Payne, and Kace Mason. What was it like having 2 different perspectives, 2 narrators in the same book? How did you balance that?
I really enjoyed it as a challenge. Part of the reason, from a creative standpoint, from the writer's standpoint, not the readers, but from the writer's standpoint, one of the reasons to do a book outside of your series or start a new series is to exercise different writing muscles. And so this is a book in which it's told in the third person. So the John Jordan series is first person narrator. This is a third person narrator with two POV protagonist narrators. And so in one sense, it creates challenges, but every challenge is also an opportunity. So I can do things in it that you can't do in a first person. First person protagonist, you can only see, the reader can only experience what that character sees and experiences, hears, and that character has to be in every scene or you don't have a scene. There's a few ways around that, and you can interject, and I have third person scenes, chapters within essentially a first person narrated book. But for the most part, that character has to be in every scene. In this case, not only does that the main characters, we can have one in a scene without the other, but then the really cool thing is you get the interiority of that character. And so in a certain scene that is impacting that character more emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, physically threatening, whatever the case may be, more than the other, then that's going to be told from that character's point of view. And so that was, really an interesting thing to be able to do. And then just to have the different perspectives and be able to experience, to see a scene experienced through two different perspectives, to have a female protagonist. I feel like I've had some really cool female characters in my books across the years, strong, independent, brilliant women. But this is one of the first where we actually get, they are telling the story, and we get to see, and hear and feel what they're thinking and experiencing, not just observing or watching them from the outside.
And with this one, you said it wasn't as dark as your John Jordan series. Were you able to play a little bit more with humor in this one? Is there a little more playfulness and
I think there
the
is. Yeah,
dynamic?
there definitely is more playfulness. It's less gritty, partly because of the setting, partly because of the tone of the book and what I was going for, partly because of the characters and their jobs. John Jordan starts as a prison chaplain. That's a dark environment that he's in, and that's a gritty. I tried to be realistic and true to the environment and the character. And the character, has investigated some really heavy cases, starting from a very young age, and they've had an impact on him. He's a recovering alcoholic and not always recovering. And so that is a big impact. And he deals with criminals and from all stratus of here of the social system. And then he becomes a sheriff's investigator. He's a detective. And so his job and the world he inhabits is very different from two people living in a retirement community who are, one's a counselor and one's a nurse, and they are not encountering many people like John Jordan does. They do encounter some threatening bad guys for sure, but it's just a different tone. And I purposefully, I wanted to do that to provide. I've had readers across the years say, "Man, I love your writing. I love the books, but it's a little too much. I can't take that whether it's the language or the grittiness." And so there's very little that's graphic in here, and there's very little profanity. And similar to the John Jordan series, most of the violence and most of the sexuality and things like that are sort of off screen, off the page. And you encounter the scenes that you get are the characters reacting to those things and just sort of processing those things after they've happened. But it's even more so in a book and a series like this.
And I saw that one of your sleuth detectives has a podcast, the Counselor, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And podcasts that have been the true crime based have been very popular. Was there any in particular that kind of inspired you or inspired that character?
And there's several that I've loved over the years, and they have inspired. I've had characters who do podcasts in previous books. In the John Jordan series, there's a couple of the main characters have a true crime podcast. And obviously, probably like about everyone, the very first one for me was Serial. Serial sort of started it all. And that's still way up there on my all-time favorite season 1 of Serial. Miss and Maura Murray has been another big one. I absolutely love Tim and Lance and what they do. And they have rebranded theirs recently, and it's just called Missing. And they have expanded to cover other true crime cases that involve missing persons. There's a new true crime podcast that I absolutely love called The Prosecutors. Highly recommend that. And it's 2 working prosecutors. We don't even get to know their last names. We just hear their first name and because they're protecting their jobs and what they do and the integrity of what they do as prosecutors. But they bring a perspective to true crime cases that's phenomenal and very much in the judicial system and from the perspective of attorneys and court proceedings. It's excellent. I like Crime Writers On, which is a review podcast of true crime podcasts. And that's really a good one to learn about what's out there and what you should, it was worth your time checking out and listening to, that kind of thing. There's so many. I could keep going, but those are some of the ones that come to mind, right off the top of my head.
What has your research process been for this book in comparison to your John Jordan series?
It's been similar. I have experts that I rely on heavily. I've got a forensics expert, pathologist, doctor who I ask all my medical / forensic questions. I have a good friend who's a sheriff in Florida, actually sheriff in the county where I live. I always go to him and ask for procedural type questions and what would his or his deputies or his investigators do in certain situations? And a lot of times he'll also tell me what the law is, the statutes involved, and what can and cannot be done. And it's so interesting to compare that to the general public and what people say, well, why don't they just do this? They know illegal activities are happening in this house. Why can't they do something about it? And of course, very often they do. But then it's up to the court system whether that person goes to prison or is bonded out the next day. I mean, it's just so many things out of the sheriff office control. Then of course with this one I had all of the true crime case information, and that included books, podcasts, YouTube videos, television shows. So that's one of the advantages of taking a true crime case and using it as a basis for my fiction, because there's just so much good information. And you do get to hear the theories, like the readers who are doing the solve a crime with me, but then also the theories, whether it's Reddit or the different podcasts, the online forums and chat rooms where people are actually sharing their theories and their thoughts and their ideas and questioning or even attacking the opinions of others, and so that's just a wealth of information that is just so rich and just gives me the opportunity to then take that and springboard into fiction, into using my imagination to come up with what I feel like is what my goal and my hope at the end of every mystery that I write is that it seems inevitable, but it's also surprising. And the early reviews are that, once again, that is the case, that the readers were, immersed and enjoying it and really had some thoughts and ideas. And yet the denouement, the surprise, the ending was a surprise to them in a way they didn't anticipate. And yet it made sense, when they put all the clues together. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I would think that would be like the hardest part, because you want it to be a little bit like make sense, but not give it away too early.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And that's the process, is layering in those clues and hopefully and no one has ever been better at this than Agatha Christie, but hopefully you can put a clue in plain sight and write it in such a way that the reader takes it to mean something other than what it really means. Or you bury that clue in and amongst a lot of others, and so it's sort of obscured, but then when they think back, I should have seen that. I should have known that that's what that meant. But that is part of the fun, and that's the more cerebral part of the plotting a murder mystery. I enjoy that a lot. I enjoy the more character-based, emotional, psychological, spiritual, lives of these characters and their interactions the most. But I do like the mystery plot, and I appreciate when I'm reading a mystery novel, and that I am surprised when I get to the end, and yet it makes sense, and it does have that sense of inevitability, and yet it is surprising. And you can imagine someone like me who has written this type of fiction for over 25 years and has studied the form, it becomes increasingly more difficult to surprise someone who, any reader who reads a lot of mysteries, but especially somebody who studies it and practices it. So I am so grateful when that happens, and just want to hug the author for giving me such a great experience.
So for your writing process, I know that there's the authors that'll do the outline, and there's the authors that will just start writing. What is your approach usually?
I do a lot of research prior to starting, usually about a month's worth. Um, but it's not like I know everything when I start. I want there still to be a lot to discover, a lot to research. And so I guess I do enough research to get started, to know where to start, how to start, basically or vaguely where I'm going, and some idea of how it's going to end, and what will happen, because it helps to have that to write toward. It always changes, and everything develops and changes throughout the process. I'm very much a discovery writer. Love getting up in the morning, rushing to the keyboard to see what happens next, and certainly hope that same kind of energy is what the reader experiences. But I do a good bit of research, and you always do more than you'll ever use. It's the whole iceberg thing. What the final book is just a fraction of all the research that you did, but it helps to, you can never know too much. So I always try to really investigate, study, research a lot, but to get started, and then do a lot more along the way.
And speaking of the mystery novels that surprise you, are there any recent reads that you have read recently where you're like, that was a really good twist?
There are several. I probably won't be able to come up with too many of them right now, but I will say that um, some of the classics that I've read recently, and I'm not sure if this is the right title, but it'll get it close enough that I think people know what I'm talking about. The chocolate poison case, is that what it's called? You might could look it up. I want to say the chocolate box poison case, or the chocolate poison case. Anyway, that is a fascinating read, and one that I was not aware of until the last few years. And I bought the book when I first heard about it a few years back, and then only got a chance to read it within the last 6 months or so. And it is about essentially it also takes real life precedents and uses it. It takes the crime club that so many of the classic detective era authors were in, and it presents them with a case, and each one gives an opinion of their theory of what happened. And so you have the setup of the case, and then each author or each detective gives his opinion, her opinion about what happens, and then the next one comes around, and you every time you hear one, you think, okay, well, that's it, that's got to be it, and then the other one undoes that and does their own, and there's I think there's 7 solutions in the original book, and then there's been 2 others published since then in subsequent editions. I think it may have just had its 50th or 75th anniversary, whatever it is, that a new edition came out, and so they had at least 2 more solutions in that one. Did you find
All
the
right,
title?
I think I did. Is it The Poison Chocolates Case by
Yeah,
Anthony Berkeley Cox, and it originally published in 1929?
that sounds right.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right. It's so fascinating. It's so much fun to see. I mean, in most um, mysteries, the detectives will come up with theories along the way, but in this one, you have a detective saying, "No, I've solved it. This is it," and then another detective does the same thing, and it goes around the table for each of them to do it. And it's I highly recommend. It's a lot of fun.
It's going to be on my list next.
Cool.
One of my questions ties into with one of our questions from the audience. Are you planning on, I know you just released this one. It's coming out the 25th?
Yes, 2 days, I think. Yep.
So you've just released it, but I know you're very prolific. You're always writing. So are you working on another one in this series, or are you working on another John Jordan? And how many do you think might come out of this series?
So I am right now working on the next John Jordan. I'm in the I I don't want to say too much, but I do want to tell you that the next John Jordan is going to be one of the most pivotal and meaningful in the series. I am so excited about this book. Um, it's the title is Out for Blood, and the tagline is someone very close to John Jordan has been murdered, and now he is out for blood. So this is going to touch John in a way that few cases have, and I have such excitement and enthusiasm about this book, and I would have regardless, but there is something about doing another series and then coming back to it that has infused me with even more excitement about this novel. So that's what I'm working on now. But then I will, right after that, go back to this series, essentially the Rain series. Every title will have Rain in it. The Sawyer Payne Case Mason mysteries, and I already have ideas for the next one or the next few. And in terms of how many there will be, quite a few. I don't know exactly how many. It's interesting. The number that came to mind was I was going to say about 10. But I remember early on in the John Jordan series, I was thinking it would be about 10, and I'm on 25 or 6 or 7, whatever it is. So it could go a very long way. I feel like I've set it up so that there's a lot that I can work with, and these characters can do for a long time to come. And I certainly hope that is the case. And if readers like the series and enjoy it, then it will keep going.
So we have a question from Denise. Will Sawyer and Case ever cross paths with John Jordan?
It's a great question. And it's very interesting because I can't remember if I had the thought about that yesterday or today. And I can't remember what triggered it. I was listening to either a book or a podcast, and they were talking about uh, detectives in their series that have had crossed paths. And I can't remember who it was now. I wish I could, but I do feel like that will happen. That's my prediction, is that they're both in these North Florida towns, and they will. There is a John Jordan counterpart in this series, in the sense that John Jordan is now currently a sheriff's investigator in Gulf County. And there's a character in this new series that is a sheriff's investigator in Creek County, where this series is set. He's a minor character. He's not the main character like John Jordan, but he is his sort of parallel in this universe. And I feel like they will collaborate and work on some cases together. Stay tuned.
Do you have any tips for any aspiring writers on how to get started?
Absolutely. I've taught a lot of writing classes over the years and workshops, and really enjoy doing that. When I wanted to become a writer, and the famous quote that I think applies to every writer is, I was a reader move to emulation. Readers who are so moved by literature and want to recreate that, for others. But when that happened to me, I didn't know any writers. There was nobody in my family. I didn't know anybody in the publishing industry. I didn't know anything, but I knew I wanted to do it. And so I set out to learn and to study and to, over the years, learn the craft and do a lot of studying in that but also the industry of publishing and everything that goes along with that. So if you want to be a writer, I think first and foremost, you have to be a voracious reader. We learn how to write well by reading writing that is well done, that is good. And as much as it is important to read in the genre we want to write in, I would say it's important to read broadly, and you read good literature, good writing in every genre. But then second to that, of course, is writing, and you learn by doing. And so write. A lot of people advise to write 1 million words, throw them away, and then you've done your apprenticeship and you're ready to write for the public. I'm not necessarily saying you have to do that, but it is one of those things where you learn by doing. Malcolm Gladwell's wisdom of the 10 years and 10,000 hours to become proficient at something is I think, instructive. We should listen to that. And one of the things he recommends is write whatever you're doing that you want to become proficient at, in this case, writing, do it with good feedback. So a writer who's serious early on, especially, should seek out a critique group, a class, a workshop where you will actually get feedback on what you're writing. And that's really the only way you will improve, is by doing it repeatedly, but then also getting that feedback that says, okay, this needs attention. What about this? You need those readers to ask, what this, that I don't understand this, or what's happening here, or what I don't get the motivation of this character, or why did she say that, and then it's never mentioned again. And writing a novel is a marathon. It is a long process, even when you do it quickly. You do, when someone like me who does it full time, when I start a book, I'm all in, and that's all I do. I mean, essentially every single day, that's what I'm doing for hours and hours and hours. And so I can complete one, pretty quickly, especially compared to the first several I wrote. But even doing that, even as quickly as that is, if it takes you several months instead of several years, you'll still find that you left so many things unanswered, so many things open. You set up something, you forgot to come back to it, or you thought you did. And so you just need feedback. And so I would say read, write, and get good feedback from readers who will be honest and know what they're talking about.
And your new title, as well as all of your John Jordans, are available to purchase. What is the best way? Amazon or your website?
My website, if someone wants, like signed copies, and I should say they're all available in hardcover, paperback, ebook, and most of them are available in audio. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any bookstores, particularly online, is really easy to get. And with ebooks, you can get them, and audiobooks, you can get them immediately. So yeah, my site or somewhere like Amazon would definitely have them all.
And the library has, I believe, most of them as well. So, and we'll be getting the new one as soon as it's processed. So stay tuned to that. Another question is Kathy. She's from Ireland, and she's looking forward to your new book. A question on the John Jordan series. How far ahead have you an overall plan for John Jordan, and whether we can expect some changes in the direction to keep us on our toes?
So I have ideas that are pretty vague, but of where the series is going to go, things that may happen eventually. But I focus on one book at a time. Really, I'm thinking of some of those overarching either character arcs or plot points, but when I write a book, I'm focused on it, and I will look at ways in which this one entry, relates to that overarching plot. But and anyway, so I do have some ideas and notions of what's going to happen, and there are changes. Like I said, in the very next book, there's some huge changes that impact John personally and professionally, and there's more to come. So in a long running series, in a single book, if you wrote a single book, I think you would very often follow the hero's journey, and you would see a character who changes so much in the course of that one book. In a long series, I think you can have some people don't. I mean, Miss Marple, Perot, Jack Reacher, Spencer, they never change, really. I mean, they're essentially the same character. The kind of character I'm writing changes, and I think he changes a lot, but it's much more slowly because it's in the arc of the series as opposed to a single book. So there will be much more change for John coming, and things will always be mixed up, and things that impact him will change the course of his life personally and professionally.
Our next question is, are you doing any in-person events, maybe in March or in the near future, for those who feel comfortable going in person?
I do. I am doing on March 9th. I will be playing some music at Little Village in St. Andrews in Panama City, and we'll have books there. So I'll be signing books as well. I'm certainly hoping, I believe I will have this new one in as well by then in hardcover and paperback. That's the goal. You never know these days with with shipping and everything with COVID. But so I will definitely be doing that. And then as the numbers decrease, as things get better and improve and vaccines go up, I'm hoping that by summer or early next fall that I can do a lot more in-person events. That's what I hope will be the case, and that's really the only thing preventing them now is just wanting to be cautious and careful with people.
Yeah, I think that's our tentative late summer, early fall, is kind of seeing how things are going. What is your editing process like? I know it's a long process to edit down and decide what to keep and what to move forward with.
Yeah, Stephen King said that there are two kinds of writers. There are, putter-inners and taker-outers, and he's one that puts in, and then of course you have a lot of editing to do at the end. A writer like me writes much more leanly, and I don't have a ton to take out. I usually have more things to put in with subsequent drafts, and so when I finish a book, I try to give it some time, and so that I can return to it with fresh eyes, with an approach of more of a reader editor rather than the writer creator. And as part of that process, I have beta readers who are readers, reviewers who have read the majority of my books, and some of them have read them all and several times. And so they give great feedback on the individual story, but then also how it fits in the context of a series or my overall catalog. And then I have editors who do the same thing. I have a developmental editor that's going to look at more of the story, more of the plot, more of character arcs. And then I have more of a proofer editor that's looking for more of the technical. They overlap and they each do both types of editing, but it is a long process, and it's not really until you finish that first draft until you see what you have, and a lot of the real work begins. And so I do some editing as I go along, but usually even with that, there's a good bit of editing left to do, once the first draft is done, and then subsequent drafts. And by the time a book comes out, it's probably anywhere from the 6th to sometimes 10th draft of the, and in many ways at that point, I'm still not done. I'll go back years later and even do more if something occurs to me or if I feel like it needs it.
I know you've revisited some of your earlier John Jordans to do some changes in editing.
Yes, on the 20th anniversary of Power in the Blood, I was thinking, gosh, this is the first thing I ever wrote. And most readers start with the first book in a series and want to read straight through. I thought, I hate for the very first exposure to John Jordan in the series is the first thing I ever wrote when I was learning how to write. So anyway, I rewrote it, and I rewrote Blood of the Lamb, the second one, and the third one as well, The Body and the Blood. And so that gave me an opportunity that, as a writer who had been writing for over 20 years, to revisit and deal with, things that I wanted to improve in the stories. And I kept them very much the same in terms of the characters and the plot, but I made adjustments in those areas. But then, particularly in the writing itself, was able to. So it was really more of the editing process in those books. But very happy with where they are now and where the series is. And you grow, hopefully evolve, and learn more about your craft and what you're doing as you go along. So it's a real gift to be able to go back to those early books and do what I was able to do.
Is there anything you wanted to share again with the new book that you're working on that we haven't covered yet, or the new one that you just released?
I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot, and I really appreciate your great questions and those that were submitted. I am really excited about this book, and I feel like these characters are worth spending time with, and I feel like the case is very interesting and baffling and compelling, and I hope that the solution that they come up with is inevitable but surprising, and that it's a page turner and extremely entertaining, but in addition offers something deeper as well in the what it means to be human, the human experience, the emotional, psychological, spiritual side of living this life. And I hope we can experience that through characters like these.
We do have a question from Connie. Do you have a favorite book that you've read over and over again?
Several. I'll try to mention just a few off the top of my head. The first one that comes to mind almost always, because if it's not my favorite novel, it's one of my favorites, and it's very often I would say it's my favorite novel. Graham Greene's The End of the Affair is just one that I have read, just numerous times. Then rather than specific books, I'll just mention some writers, some authors that I read over and over. There's the classics, of course, like Hemingway, and I revisit his writing a lot. In crime fiction in particular, Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, Agatha Christie, as I've mentioned, these are people I read over and over and over again. More contemporarily, I would say Robert B. Parker is way up there. James Lee Burke is someone who I, read books of his over and over and over again. Michael Connelly, I return to the Easy Rawlings series a lot, over and over again. And there are so many more, and that's just really talking about fiction. I haven't even gotten into, nonfiction. I read Thomas More and Frederick Buechner over and over and over and over again, and many others, but those are some of the ones that I go back to over and over again.
And we have another question on whether you read much Sherlock Holmes.
I used to. I haven't as much lately, but I definitely, for a while there, consumed everything, and those are books that are stories, especially, that I have read numerous times.
If you could spend an afternoon with any of your characters, who would it be? So it would be your character, someone you've written.
Off the top of my head, I would say that Mama Monroe would probably, that's Marilyn Monroe's mother. I would really enjoy spending an afternoon with her in her kitchen. That would be my pick at the moment.
And Susan asks, can you talk a little bit about the spirituality of the characters in the new book?
Yes, I would say it's definitely not as overt as a character like John Jordan's. They are very thoughtful, introspective people. Sawyer is going to come from a psychological standpoint in almost everything, and there's certainly a spiritual side to that. But they are not, so far, neither one of them are spiritual in any way approaching a character like John Jordan. So they are very different. I do believe they are spiritual beings, but it's just not overt, and it's not expressed in a way that a character like John is.
One comment from Sarah is that she can't wait to read the new book and see how you end it. And we have another question from Kathy. If you had to pick an actor to play John Jordan on the big screen, who would it be?
Oh, that's so difficult. There's a, work is being done on a John Jordan TV series. And so that definitely comes up, from time to time. I've been asked so many times, even by the producers, and I can only give, I express to them the kind of things that I think are important, but I've not chosen or picked a single actor. I'm not sure I can. It's and I also, since I will not get the final say in that, I try not to think about it too much, because that's sort of out of my realm when it does get cast. But I'm sorry to not really be able to give an answer, but I'd love to know who you think might be a good one. But I can't, there's nobody I can just mention right now that I think would be suited.
The perfect fit. Is
Yeah.
there anything you can tell us about the new TV series that's in the works, or is it sworn to secrecy?
Well, I can just say that I am, these things take such a long time, but I am confident that it's going to happen. And I am very impressed and appreciative of the producer, the main producer behind it, the creator, the executive producer, the essentially would be the showrunner. I feel like the series is in good hands, and I like the choices that have been made, and that includes the directions that they've not gone in. You can, in order to get something made, you can cut corners, or you can change it so much that it's not even recognizable. What I do not want, and one of the things that has been offered, or at least discussed, I do not want a network TV show where you have a different mystery every episode, you get 50 minutes to solve a case. To me, that's not nearly enough time. I find those type of shows really lacking for my taste. And so what's being developed is a long form show where each season will be one case. There'll be subplots and other cases as well, but there'll be one main case in the tradition of True Detective or Bosch or some of these Broadchurch, some of these kind of series. And that's what we're going for. And I think that's what would be best suited. I think that fits so much better than a feature film. Feature film has its place, and there's an adaptation being worked on of Double Exposure. I think that will work well as a feature film. But for a series like the Jordan series, I'm glad it's going to be long form, limited run TV series.
That sounds great. And usually if it's the one episode, you just miss so much if they're doing a whole book in one episode. So stretching it out makes like a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And yes, we have another comment. Yay, one story for each season sounds great.
Yeah.
And I could binge watch that.
Nice.
I think we're wrapping up our questions, and
I want to thank you again for doing this. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it too. And do you know anything about what network the series will be on?
No, it'll most likely be a platform like, and I'm not saying it's one of these, but like Netflix, Hulu,
like a streaming
HBO Max, you know, they're the type of platforms that do these kind of series.
Well, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Always great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Same.
Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You
Have
too.
a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.